went to Berklee College of Music, and I double majored. So I did both performance and music production engineering.
Nice.
And so my plan was, just like a lot of people, my plan was always to have like to daylight as a technical engineer, like to make money from that. And then my real life, once I clock out, would be the music, the career.
Right.
And it, for the most part, it kind of is like that right now, but not in the way that I thought. The reason why is just because the funneling system to get into the studio profession, career profession, especially in a place like New York or LA, requires a lot of free labor, a lot of interning and getting your ass just like handed to you
right
at the worst hours of the day for years until up, right?
Right.
It's a very, very grindy, and you have to eat a lot of shit. But at the same time,
it's a lot of side investing.
Yeah, but it's also one of those careers or professions where anything could happen, and anybody could walk into the studio, and if you just happen to be in the room at the right time, your name could end up on a Grammy Award-winning record, right?
Right.
And just having that happen to you, whether or not you actually did contribute anything to it or not, is enough to make the rest of your career, right? It's enough to guarantee that you get work for the rest of your year.
There's still something about that whole,
of course, and to be fair, like it doesn't, like, that's not to say that you don't have to be a skilled engineer or worker or employee to like earn that. Like, you can still be a lit engineer and not have done anything. It really is a lot of times boils down to luck, but also just your personality style. Like, if you are a person that they like to have around, right? Because you're not going to get called to that session with an artist that may or may not end up getting a Grammy unless the person who's running the session likes you as a person, like thinks you can hang, thinks you're going to be cool enough to be around the talent, or you won't make problems or be weird or starstruck or whatever it is, right? But the other side of that, they want to make sure that you'll keep your mouth shut. They want to make sure that you're going to be a team player. And I didn't realize what it would eventually mean, because I was working in a few studios in New York, and a lot of those studios, especially now, are like rented out for rap and hip hop artists, which I love rap, I love hip hop, I grew up on it, and some R&B, and there was I was pretty good, still decent engineer, and kept getting called back for sessions. And this is while I was working full time and getting my master's, so I was really like not having any free time. It was like I would literally work. I used to work for this online audio company as my day job, like a 9 to 5, and then I was just still starting out in New York, so I was taking on a bunch of projects and clients. But then I eventually started getting called. Me and my friends started getting called for studio writing sessions and top lining sessions in in Hell's Kitchen and stuff. And all of these sessions would start at like 8 p.m., 9 p.m. and run to like 6, 7 in the morning.
Wow.
And so for me, there was probably like a 5 to 6 month period of time where, 3 nights out of the week, I would work 9 to 5. And this was in Inwood, in like, Long Island, actually, not Inwood, Manhattan, but Inwood, Long Island. And I would literally clock out at 5 o'clock, drive all the way into Brooklyn, and actually not Brooklyn, into New York, into Hell's Kitchen, and work in the studio for 8 more hours.
Which at 5 o'clock, for those of you who don't know, driving from Long Island to Hell's Kitchen could take
about an hour, 45 minutes.
3 hours.
Yeah. So you got there at 9. Yeah.
No, basically, I would get and then finding parking, right?
Right.
But like, about 8 o'clock sessions would run, and there was a few different songwriters I would work with. So I worked for this, or I guess I got a record company / management company / songwriting company, whatever you want to call it. They had a few songwriters on their staff, and every day they would have 3 new beats. I would come into the studios, 3 new beats, and our job was to top line over these 3 songs. And by the end of the day, we should have walked away with 3 finished songs. And my job was just engineering. So I was running Pro Tools, I was mixing, I was editing. And really, it was more so just being the person that ran the session. So the songwriter, who was one of the most magnificent, quick-witted, talented songwriters I've ever been in the same room with. She would literally sit in the studio room and just I would play the track for her, and she would just freestyle for like verses and verses until she came up with the line and the melody. Then she would write the harmonies over top of it. Then she'd do the rest of the song. And then we go back, she'd like add ad libs and she's like, okay, we're done, next song. I'm like, what? And we would do that in like 3 or 4 hours. And I would be editing and mixing as I go. So like it was so demanding. She'd be like, hey, can you take that one line from like the first verse and move it over here just really quick? And I have to go back and find it and like do it. And she's like, if I didn't do it in like 40 seconds, she'd be like, what the fuck is taking so long? Like, serious, you know, she was serious. And so, so it was stressful. It was really stressful.
Yeah,
like,
I can imagine.
I built up a lot of chops, but man, it was one of the most stressful, like, you know, studio jobs that I had. And obviously it was like 3 a.m. after working an 8-hour shift. So I'm like dying, you know, this is maybe 3 nights a week, not every night, but like a couple of nights a week, we would do this. And it actually paid really well, as like, you know, studio engineers, especially in New York, don't get paid very well. So, but I was getting paid like $25 an hour for this, which was really good for freshman, like a studio engineer coming straight out of college. And she was writing songs for Kanye West. I didn't know this, and this was like, I guess, more of an NDA thing. And she has actually passed away since this has happened. Rest in peace. But her name was Andrea Martin, and she had written a bunch of songs for a lot of artists. But what I didn't realize what we were doing is, because these songs never actually came out, not in the way that I thought that they would. And all these songs were really strange and odd, and like they were all in different genres, and they all had different styles and different subject matter. And I was like, how is Kanye going to use any of these songs? Then I realized, and it was explained to me, that these types of artists, Kanye, like, you know, Ace, like all, you know, all these people, they have entire production houses, you know, Drake, all of them, Kendrick, they all have production houses throughout the country where they hire songwriters to write them songs, and they use those songs as samples for when they're making their actual music. So like whenever Kanye uses a song and there's like an old timey sample in it, and you're like, what song? I've never heard this song before. Like, this is not a famous song or anything. It's because that person made that song from scratch to make it sound like this, like a 70s old. Yeah. And they will literally write entire songs just to sample 10 seconds of it for a loop in a song.
That's crazy.
And we just did that. We just did dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And to this day, I have no idea. I don't listen to his music. I haven't listened to it since like 2010. So I don't know if any of the songs that we ever did ended up on those records, and I wouldn't have gotten credit for it anyways, because it's your studio engineer. But like, that's what they were doing. And that was so interesting to me at first, until you know, when you start to hang out with that crowd, they start to bring people around. And so this was one of the 2 studio jobs I was kind of juggling at the time. I was doing this one, and then like every so often I'd get called in for a session for a studio in Chinatown, I think. And that studio had major label artists coming in to like actually record vocals, and I was just an assistant. So I would just be there, you know, patching cables, you know, like moving stuff around, like getting coffee, like that type of stuff. And around both around the same time, when I was in the studio session with Andrea, she had a couple of friends that came in one night, and they were just like in the middle of a song. She like took a break, and they were just like, you know, gossiping, talking like about their experiences, because they used to work together in record labels and stuff. And so her friend was another female around the same age, and I overheard them talking, and I heard them mention R. Kelly.
Oh no.
And I just like, my ears perked up, and I was like, this is maybe a year or 2 after like that documentary had come out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of fresh back then. And so I kind of jumped in the conversation. I was like, oh, what are you guys talking about? And she said, basically, she was explaining to me that this woman, who her friend was, used to work at the record label that had signed R. Kelly. And one of her jobs was to send out checks to just people every month.
Oh no.
And if you've seen the documentary or know anything about it, it was the hush. It was the hush money for the parents of the victims that were allowing their. I'm not even like, she didn't know. She had no idea. She had no idea.
Yeah.
She was just like,
she's getting. They're like,
hey, do me a favor, go send out a check. Cool.
Yeah.
My check.
It's like, oh, why? It's just like, it's just like songwriting or royalties or whatever it may be. She was just send them checks, and it was like thousands of dollars a month per person. Like, it wasn't a little bit, you know. And so when she found out later, like when all that stuff came out, she quit. Obviously, she quit. And I'm pretty sure like she was part of the. I have no idea, but I think she was part of the trial. But like after hearing that, I was like, oh my god, what am I getting myself into?